All right, I think we're going. Welcome back to another one of these things where we're just kind of talking about whatever comes to mind. Hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday. On my side, as usual, it is rather a haikus day. I don't want to say no pun intended because I named it what I did because it sounded like Tuesday, and I guess other people are just going to inherently think of that as a pun, and really it was just like maybe me thinking it sounded, because it sounds like Tuesday, it becomes a pun like inherently or something. I'm not sure how the formation of these things, these concepts actually happens in real time. I don't think I intended it to be a funny thing, just a way to modify the word Tuesday with what I was posting. But I digress. Hope your day has been a fantastic one. And let's see if what I said yesterday is accurate or not. So, like I said yesterday, I keep a list of topics that I might want to talk about, and I said that yesterday I was going to talk about something, and I ended up deciding talking about something else. So today we'll try and go back to what we were talking about yesterday. And the only note I have for myself is literacy and conversation. And generally, I think I remembered what it is that I wanted to say, which might be because I talked about it for a little bit here, in addition to writing it down. But let's go ahead and unpack what I kind of mean with that, because that's kind of a broad, a bit of a vagary, if that's an actual word that you can use. When people think of literacy, they're probably thinking of something like being able to read or comprehend something. And that's not exactly what I mean when talking about literacy in general, because I think literacy can be applied to just about everything, frankly, that in order to kind of understand and have I don't want to say have any conversation about something, because I think you can have conversations about things that you're not exactly knowledgeable of, a little bit of, and you can talk a bit about it. It's kind of like when I talk about in Prismatic Planet, the concept of knowing something, of knowledge, care, or knowledge, literacy, care, advocacy. When breaking it down through that pipeline, that you can still have a conversation about something you were generally knowledgeable about, or even before that. Like, you support something and you know a little bit about it, enough that you are willing to say that you support this thing. So in my case with Prismatic Planet, this is one of those things that it all kind of goes back to a bit of what made me think about this in the first place is when I'm talking about a topic that I'm new to, it feels like my brain runs out of its train of thought very quickly. I don't know if you notice, for those who do watch a fair amount of these things, if there are people like that exist. If they do at some point in the future, then the stuff I talk about on Fridays is usually game related. And I grew up playing a lot of games, enough that I cared enough about wanting to get involved in creating games in a few aspects. When I was initially going to college, I was learning to write music so I could write music for games, and then I ended up liking the concept of designing games and building just the entire thing. So I started learning that as well. Over the course of that, I learned so much about what goes into making a game, not just from the making side, but because I've constantly played games, video games, throughout my life. I know a lot about the player side of understanding the whole, development and what you're delivering to the player mentality as well. I understand that handoff, coming from both sides there for over 30 years at this point. And that's not to say a lot of people don't. I'm not saying that I have something that other people don't in this case. I'm just saying that I have a certain literacy in playing and creating game content, or games in general. That we actually had this thing when I was in high school, two of my other good friends, we're still friends to this day. One of us, between the three of us, we knew a lot about like kind of what we considered the pillars of just video games. And basically it just boiled down to platforms that video games were coming out on. We had somebody who was like really knowledgeable about PC games. We had somebody who was really knowledgeable about handheld games. And we had somebody, this guy, who was very knowledgeable about console games at the time. That was really most of the games that I was playing were console games. I understood kind of the, I don't want to say intricacies, but they kind of are when talking about playing a console game versus say playing a handheld game or a PC game. That handheld is probably a little bit closer to what console delivers, but at the same time, there are still further intricacies in handheld that aren't in console, and things that PC game players and makers have to think about that the other two categories don't have to think about. And as long as all of us were, like, we could all talk to each other generally about each of those things to a certain degree, but we'd always really recognize that one of us knew a bit more than other people in like those kinds of categories. When somebody came to our group of people, our group of friends, like with a question about games, if it was for a game console or a game for a game console, we would generally funnel that to me to tackle that question because I happen to know the most about it. I was able to give a more educated response to any question that came by, or have a better conversation, or convey a topic in a way that made sense to somebody because I was more literate in those intricacies. I can talk about it at various levels. I don't have to talk about it at the level that I know it. I'm able to talk down or up as needed to make the point, essentially. And I wasn't comfortable doing that for PC games or handheld games. So when we had questions like that come in from other people, generally from band, asking these kinds of questions, we'd funnel those questions to the person who would be able to answer that. That isn't to say all of us couldn't start talking about it, and sometimes the question is high level enough that anybody could. But if somebody had a question about like kinds of games, or understanding like what they like in games and what they're looking for, or opinions on a certain thing, or which console should I get, kinds of questions, then the others are more opinions, whereas one of our opinions would still be an opinion, but you'd have a broader sense of the topic. You'd be able to talk about it at a greater, breadth and depth. So that's one of the things that I think is pretty important when just talking about or wanting to talk about things in general. I find that as I'm learning more about the environment, just ecology and a bit of biology, not a lot of biology, a bit of botany, to be able to speak with any sort of confidence, it's understanding that building that literacy is something that is very key to being able to deliver good. I shouldn't say good. It is good. It's just that's a subjective term. Valuable input. You're able to provide valuable content. You're able to say, this is an educational page. I covered the parts that I think should be covered. Whereas right now, I'd probably have to rehash a lot of these in a few years when I'm more knowledgeable about all these topics to be like, yeah, that is kind of interesting, but somebody who's just jumping into this stuff to begin with isn't going to care about that. And there's a better way to describe that. I've thought of over the course of my years of learning this stuff, and there are better ways to talk about this thing to a broader audience, or to an audience that doesn't know as much. I wouldn't know about it because the only level I can talk at is my level currently. I don't know when I have to talk up or down. It's just, I learned this cool thing. I want to share this cool thing. And there's nothing really wrong about that. We all have to learn in some way. And if that's how you learn, then that's a great way to learn. And if other people learn in that way too, or at roughly your level, then the information is still valuable. It's just when you're learning, these kinds of things, it's good to know kind of or gauge what level your literacy is at for that given topic. And it's one of those things that I'm still kind of getting used to. Anytime I talk about it here or with other people, I tend to feel like I run to an end of a road with where I want to go from a conversation perspective, which feels kind of bad to me. It feels like it's one of those things like I never really had a problem with when I was younger, which might be a sign of me not caring that I was being loose with facts when I was younger, that I care more about being true with what I'm saying now. I don't want to spread misinformation in a world where spreading misinformation has never been easier. I don't want to be contributing to that where I can prevent it. So I don't like to guess anymore. Say like, I think this might be the case, or I'm not sure, check other things, but I believe this is right. I don't like doing that very often. Here it's not a big deal just because it's very candid, and I don't expect anybody to take this stuff and be like, this is a very reliable source. This is somebody just practicing talking in front of a camera. But on Prismatic Planet, I'm not going to say anything like, I go check other sources, but this is what we think. That's not what I want to do. I want to make sure I know what I'm saying. And when I'm talking about the environment, sort of either, I guess, as somebody who wants to be more right or spread more facts about how the Earth works and how humans treat the Earth, I want to do that. I want to be a good like information custodian, essentially. I don't want to spread the wrong thing, because that person, if they found that to be interesting, might start sharing that to other people, and then it's just kind of out of control at that point. So it might be a little bit of that. But I also recognize that aside from not wanting to be loose with facts, it just kind of feels bad. Like you want to be a little bit further along, to be able to talk more candidly about a topic. When I see other people do that, it's kind of like, you know what, I want to be there. And I have to look back and realize that even for like all of the game stuff and music stuff, even because I studied music for 4 years, and even before that, like in high school and things, it's just a lot of time that you have to spend. And that was me dedicating basically my entire life to it outside of like school. Like when I was growing up, it was just like, okay, schoolwork, but then everything else was essentially games. I have a lot of experience in games. So that literacy built itself up over time, not because I was necessarily going out of my way to learn it, but because I was entrenched in it. And music was more, I am going out of my way to learn it, but it's my full-time job and then some to learn it. And me going through this for environmental sciences and earth sciences now, it feels like I'm going slower. But that's okay, because I don't have the luxury of being entrenched in it for decades, for it being my full-time job to learn something for 4 years, and then a part-time job for some of it for even a little bit before that. I've been doing this for 2 years now, and I'm grateful for knowing that I can do some plant ID better than I could 2 years ago, that I'm identifying ways to use data that environmental scientists have to spread more information about the world to people, that I can go out there and generally know what I'm reading a lot better now. Like when I'm looking for news stories, I wouldn't have done a newsletter in my first year of doing this because I wouldn't really know what to search for or how to distill information from studies and things in a manner that made it easier to understand than was already being conveyed by experts. It's like, what can I add to this? How can I do my own spin on this that's worth doing? And now it feels like I can. My storytelling ability, in conjunction with the literacy that I'm building, is letting me use my voice to say things I couldn't a year ago. And it's like even now, still, like 2 years down the line, I am still running into those end of the road feelings where it's like, okay, I want to say this thing, but I don't really know how to keep going. And I can't just talk as candidly about it. Like, I feel like I'm forcing myself to talk about some things, or I'm doing a bit more rambling or rehashing things that I've already said. That's not what I want to do. I want to like have an engaging, active conversation, not just reiterate facts. Which is kind of how that whole string of sentences went. I'm not used to talking about it, so it's a little harder to talk about it. And you don't really recognize, at least I didn't really recognize, that's a good way to say it, like that you have spent enough time to now talk candidly, intelligently, and engagingly about something ad nauseum. That I'm still working on it, and it's an important thing to work on so that more people can have those conversations, that they're not just rehashing things that they've heard from other people, that they're able to think critically about something and add something of value with their own voice and opinion. And everybody's like a little bit of an expert in a bunch of things, and it makes them feel like they can go there just because they heard somebody that they think is smart say something that sounded smart to them to other people, and then it's like, yeah, that wasn't really true, and then they're like, well, I still believe it, and it's like, okay. We have a lot of that, and that recognizing when that's what you're doing in a conversation is something I think we need to work on just as people. And I think that really just boils down to that concept of literacy. Knowing, not reading and writing literacy, like in our like academic term, but our comfortability to talk candidly, intelligently, and engagingly, actively speaking with people about a topic, and knowing when we're that person. Like, we should be in a spot where, like, we were doing what I was doing in high school. I'll never say that again. Where, like, our group of friends is like, we know that there are experts. Like, anybody coming to us is just like, it's just video games. But the three of us are just like, yeah, but there's a lot of, like, intricacies in what you're playing, what you're doing, depending on the type of game that you're looking to do. And we understood that as essentially kids. And we don't really, a lot of people don't, I don't feel like we as a society see that very much, like where we are now. That even the most trite of examples, I shouldn't say that, video games are art, and like we should be treating them like that. But at the end of the day, it's entertainment. That's what it's art and it's entertainment. And there is value in that, don't get me wrong, but it's not, people aren't dying over it. So if we could see that there are intricacies in there, and there's a literacy involved in understanding that whole medium, that there is going to be literacy in just about every topic you can think of, every topic under the sun, and recognizing when you are and when you aren't the kind of person who can talk like that, talk candidly like that on that topic, knowing when to point somebody to somebody who is somebody who can talk through that, or recognizing that you have work yourself to do to learn that, so that you can talk about the thing that you want to talk about. In my case, I do want to learn more about, I want to be able to talk candidly about earth sciences and environmental sciences. I'm not there yet. That kind of stinks when I think about it, and when I get to those points in conversations, I'm like, I wish I could say more, better, or smarter, but I'm just rehashing what I said before. But I'll get there, because I think that's the thing at the end of the day. You're either just, it's a part of who you are and your experience and how you're living, as it was with video games for me, or you are able to basically set aside 4 years of your life to just devote to learning that thing. You're definitely going to come away knowing that thing better. But for those of us who are learning things on the side of either doing everything that we have to do, just adulting and making sure we're financially stable and doing okay with our job and our family and our friends. After all of that, we're learning. That's where we're learning, is in that space, that leftover space. And it takes a lot of time to build up literacy with that leftover space. So, yeah. Those are just some thoughts. Yeah. I think that's all I got. All right. Hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday. And we'll catch you in the next one. See ya.